Anyone who's ever done anything worth doing has dreamed big, failed mightily, and mostly started from humble beginnings. This is a podcast about such people. The most fascinating podcast in the world is fascinating because of the stories of the human beings. Hello, everybody. This is Pat DeCerbo. Most fascinating podcast in the world. Has nothing to do with me. It's fascinating because of the people that we have on the show. Today we have John Schlifske, President, CEO, and Chairman of the Board of Northwestern Mutual. He started at Northwestern Mutual in 1987. John, for undergraduate, is a graduate of Carleton College, where, if I'm not mistaken, he played football. He also has his MBA from Northwestern in Chicago. And John is a director of a public company, Kohl's Corporation, and is a member of the executive committee of the American Council of Life Insurers, Board of Directors, and the Greater Milwaukee. And in the Greater Milwaukee community, serves on the board of the Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce. John is a Milwaukee area native, and he loves Milwaukee and is married to Kim, and they have 6 children. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Pat. I hope I keep this fascinating conversation thing going, but I'll try my best. But thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you. We talked about this a little bit before, but when you were a child, like, what are your earliest memories from growing up?
Well, it's a funny question because I have a distinct earliest memory, which is when I was a kid. I think I was 4 years old at the time. I might have been just before I turned 4, but we lived on a street that had an alley. So there was, our house faced one direction. There was an alley, houses on the other side faced the other. And my grandfather was over for a family dinner once, and he did not like to sit still after dinner, and so he would always go for a walk, and I must have been just old enough that I could go for a walk with him. And so as we came around the block, and we were walking down the other side of our block, there was a 4-year-old kid who literally was in the house almost where his garage backed up to our garage across the alley. I'd never met him before, and his name was Steve, and I met him on that walk, and we became fast friends. And it just shows you, it's for a fun memory, but it just shows you how little my world was when I was 4, that I didn't even know that there was a 4-year-old across the alley. And I'm sure my mom didn't want me wandering across an alley with garbage trucks and dump trucks going through our alley and stuff like that. But that's, for some reason, that's my first memory. And Steve and I became lifelong friends.
Are you in touch with him?
Yeah, he lives in California. He became an engineer. He's got a PhD in engineering. I forget what school he's at, what university he's at in California. We probably talk to each other once every other year.
Mm-hmm. When you were a kid, I think I have a memory of you telling me that it was nonstop sports when you were a little kid, like lots of kids in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
What was your sport, or did you play everything? Or?
Well, I was born in 1959, so I was right in the middle of the baby boom, and the town we lived in was, I think, about a mile square, and there were just a ton of kids in my neighborhood, and they were every age from, my age to maybe 5, 6, 7 years older, and we did everything. We played basketball, we played football, we played baseball, we would play kick the can, we would play hide and go seek in the dark and in the summer days. And it was literally, if you ever seen the movie Sandlot, my life was like Sandlot. Is that I'd get up in the morning, get on my bike, and I'd ride somewhere and do something with all these boys. And typically it was baseball in the summer, but we would play basketball a lot. We played a lot of football, obviously played touch football when you're a little kid, but it was just one of those eras where you could leave in the morning. My mom wanted me home for lunch. I'd come back for lunch, go back out in the afternoon. You never had to check in. There were no cell phones. It was a safe neighborhood. And so we just did sports all day long. It was other than going to school, of course. And it was just idyllic. It was just a beautiful way to grow up, and just have nothing but good memories about it.
Hmm. At what point did you gravitate towards like a varsity sport or kind of like
Well,
a
I
football?
gravitated towards football, I think, because I wasn't good enough at the other sports. My favorite sport was baseball. If I could have been a professional athlete, I would have been a base. I could that I could have chosen. I would have picked baseball. I love baseball. I love the game. I love watching it. I love everything about baseball, the
Mm,
traditions. But football, I'm six. I don't know if you can tell. I'm 6'2". In high school, I weighed about 215 pounds. I wasn't super fast, so my 40 times weren't like Division I athlete stuff, but I was big enough, strong enough, and quick enough that in high school, I could be a reasonably good football player. And so, sort of by the process of elimination, I didn't make the varsity basketball team. I didn't make the varsity baseball team, but I made the varsity football team. And that's kind of how I stuck with it over the years.
hmm You must have been pretty good since you played in college.
I think if I had been faster, I could have maybe played I played Carleton's Division III, true student athlete kind of thing.
Mm,
I love playing in college. Part of the reason I went to college, I went to Carleton is because I could play football there. I really, really wanted to play football in college, and I knew I wasn't Division I material mainly because of my speed, as I said, and I was lucky enough to play at Carleton. I started as a freshman, so I'm not saying that to brag, but I was good enough to be a relatively good Division III varsity football athlete. And I started every game I was there on varsity, and it was a fun experience. It was a bonding experience. The beauty of being a football player is you'd go to campus two weeks before everyone else. So as a freshman, that was especially important. You had a sort of a tailor-made set of peers that you could become friends with. Got to travel a lot with everybody. And it's an football in college is an immersive experience. It's much more work hours than in high school, and I loved it. I loved it. My best grades were in the fall. There was something about the discipline of being an athlete that led. I had worse grades when I didn't have practice 6 days a week than when I did have practice 6 days a week. It's bizarre, but it was good for me in almost every way imaginable.
I can relate. Not because I played football, but the regimen.
Yeah, the regimen.
Did you play all 4 years?
I played my last year. I believe it or not, I broke my neck on the first play of the first game.
Mm.
Not the first play of the first game, the first half of the first game. I got in a weird position. I didn't do what I was supposed to do, so I was trying to get back where I was supposed to, and I turned around, and it was the lead back, the guy blocking for the lead back hit me in the back of the helmet and compressed my neck down, and I shattered two vertebrae, and so I was literally on the field paralyzed for 1 minute.
Oh,
It was the
jeez.
worst experience of my life, and then after about a minute, which doesn't seem that long unless you're laying there without
Right.
feeling in your arms and legs. You know
Mm-hmm.
how when your arm feels asleep, you get that tingling? All of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, I started getting that through my body. So that
Mm.
made me feel better. And I could move at that point then. So everything was movable. But, they took me to a hospital, and I was in traction for a week and had to wear a collar for 6 months until my neck healed. And so my senior year, I basically missed because I was injured.
Wow. Did they
Yeah.
put you on like a backboard to get you off the
Yeah.
field,
Oh,
or
yeah.
did you get a?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
The whole thing. It wasn't quite as glamorous
Mm.
as the NFL where they drive a golf cart out, but there
Right.
was a backboard. The ambulance drove out on the field, and
Oh
they took
man.
me to an emergency room, and it was in St. Paul. We were playing St. Thomas at the time, um,
Mm.
and I went to a hospital in St. Paul. Carleton's about 40 miles south of St. Paul. It was a away
Mm-hmm.
game, but close enough to campus that it worked out okay for me.
Mm. Man, dodged a bullet on that
I
one.
dodged a major bullet. Major bullet.
So, were you in a business curriculum in college? What were you studying?
No, I was a liberal arts major. Carleton doesn't have, Carleton is just a liberal arts school. I was an
Mm.
econ major. I was drawn to, I knew I wanted to be in business, which is a separate story I can tell you if you want. But I
Mm.
figured econ was the best major for someone who wanted to go into business. In retrospect, and it was, I loved econ, still do to this day. You know, Northwestern Mutual is a huge asset management firm,
Mm.
and understanding the economy, where the markets might be going, and all that stuff is very important in terms of acumen on the job. But I also took a lot of philosophy courses, and I love philosophy
Mm.
courses. And I sometimes wish I'd majored in philosophy. It was a harder discipline than economics was. And I think that scared me away a little bit. But I really loved the liberal arts curriculum. I really did. And I tell everyone, you don't need to be a business major to succeed in business. You need to be a strong critical thinker, and you can develop that in almost any discipline, including, you know, religion or theology, or, you know, maybe majors that don't seem at all sort of aligned with business. It's really the critical thinking skills that matter. I mean, they can teach you accounting and finance, but at some level in your career, it's just everyone knows that. That's not what's going to get you ahead. It's your ability to think and lead and all that stuff. And I think a liberal arts education is great for that. Really do.
I happen to agree. As you can see, the union
I know,
banners
Union
behind me.
College. Yeah.
And I was a volunteer and still am a volunteer for many years and on the board for a while. And, you know, it's a huge concern right now at all liberal arts colleges that everyone's complaining about the cost. And then when we get out, we're not qualified to do anything. And
Yeah.
in my case, I was a European history, Spanish major. Those were my interdepartmental majors with basically a minor in anthropology. But paradoxically, that was great training for life. I
Yeah.
was interviewing people in foreign countries who did not
Yeah.
want to speak to me. They were
I bet.
suspicious, not unlike my job now.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I speak Spanish, which helps me with a lot of receptionists in
Right.
major cities who answer the
Right.
phone and they're bilingual.
Yeah.
And a command of history, I think, helps in any environment.
Big time.
But I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah. I think,
Thank you.
I think, I don't think, other than maybe the actuarial department here, I don't think there's a single entry level job that requires a business degree. Maybe some of our controller functions, you need to be maybe have a little bit more accounting, but the vast majority of our issues at this company are not how do you solve an actuarial problem, or it's business judgment, and it's the business judgment is critical thinking. It's not, there's no book learning that goes with that. It's more the experience of life. So I'm firmly tell all my kids get a liberal arts major. One of my sons is an engineer, so that's fine, but the
Mm-hmm.
rest of them are all on the track to have or are on the track to a liberal arts degree, and I think that's the way to go.
Me
Plus, you're
too.
gonna, most business jobs now require a
Mm-hmm.
second degree, whether it's a law degree or an MBA or an actuarial, all the actuarial tests you have to pass. So, you know, it's not like you're not going to get another bite at the apple for that.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny too, like, you know, we're all terrified of the cost of education, but the odds of knowing at 16 or 17 what you want to do for the rest of your life are
No.
just, I mean, most people who go to school for a technical degree end up bailing anyway. You know,
Yeah.
there's a million lawyers in business, even the doctors today are, you know, they're,
The reason I'm at an insurance company is I was getting my MBA, so at that
mm,
point I thought I wanted to work in the investment management world, and so
mm-hmm,
I was one of the rare people. You can't do this anymore, but I went right from college to business school, so no work experience between Carleton and Kellogg at Northwestern.
mm-hmm,
So I'm like 23 years old with all these 30-something year olds looking for a job in investments, and I went to hear Warren Buffett speak somewhere in downtown Chicago, and he said, if you want to build your investment skills, work for a life insurance company. And he said they have all the asset classes, they're long-term buy and hold investors, they're disciplined at security selection, they're not trendy in terms of, you know, switching between small cap and bonds. They're more or less stick to their asset allocation strategy. And that made a huge impression on me. So I went to work for a life insurance company, not Northwestern Mutual, but one of our competitors right out of business school. And it was a great education on how to manage money. And that was so that goes to your point. I didn't even know at 23 what I wanted to do. And if it wasn't for that weird coincidence of hearing Warren Buffett talk about it, who knows what would have happened. So I'm very thankful. And I've written him and we've corresponded, and I've thanked him for that advice. And I'm very appreciative that I was lucky enough to be there that day.
He's
I mean,
got a
there were
lot of.
literally like 500 people in the room. You know what I mean? It was just
He
lightning
was
strike.
talking directly to you, though.
It felt like it. It felt like it.
I have a funny story about him, not about me and him, but just Jordan Burroughs, the winningest wrestler in American history, is from New Jersey, but went to Nebraska. And when he got his gold medal in the Olympics, he was back in Lincoln, and he went to Omaha to have lunch with Warren Buffett, and they turned it into like a press conference type of thing. And Jordan took his medal and he put it around, or he handed it to Warren, and he said, "Here, you can hold my medal, my greatest accomplishment." And they snapped a picture. And then Warren gave him back the medal and took his wallet, and he handed it to Jordan. He said, "You can hold my wallet, my greatest accomplishment."
That's yeah,
He's
that's pretty
so
good.
funny.
He's a funny guy.
So you went to college. Did you ever go to Wall Street, like before you ended up in '87 at
So I
NML?
went when I graduated from business school, I went to work for MetLife.
Okay.
MetLife, very similar back then. It was a mutual life insurance company to what Northwestern Mutual is now and was then. Um, I didn't want to work in Milwaukee. I'm from Milwaukee, so that's where Northwestern Mutual is based, as you know.
Mm.
And I just didn't want to. And I had worked at NM the summer between my first and second years of business school, met a lot of really high quality people. But I just felt like I had to see part of the world. So MetLife had offices, investment offices in Chicago and New York, and I went to work in their Chicago office and loved it. Then they moved me to their New York office, and it was at 23rd Madison. It used to be the tallest building in New York. You can do your history. It's got a little gold
It's
four-sided,
beautiful, right on
beautiful
Park
building,
Avenue.
Art Deco, gorgeous
Yeah.
building. Um, but to be honest with you, at that point in my life, I was, I think, 28 years old, and we didn't get paid a ton of money, and I just wasn't enjoying New York City. And Northwestern Mutual was looking for someone with my kind of experience, and as fate would have it, on a day when I was probably more upset with New York than maybe I should have been, but I interviewed and I got the job, and that's why I came here. So I never worked on Wall Street, like in terms of an investment banking firm or anything like that. But I did work in New York, and I love the hustle bustle, and I love the financial markets in New York, and I love traveling New York and visiting with all those firms. But I never worked there.
So you end up at NML at 28 years old. What was it like in the beginning?
Well, I tell everyone the luckiest thing this among the lucky things that have happened to me in my life was that the job I was interviewing for at NM wasn't what I thought it was, and it was more of an entry level job. And but I was so desperate to get out of New York that I took the job. And I tell all my kids this. So it's like I took a step back career wise. And the reason it was lucky is I'd worked at MetLife for over 4 years, and I'd made every mistake you can make. And I come to Northwestern Mutual, and people thought I was brilliant. And it wasn't that. It was just that but I was in an entry level job, but I had this experience. And so the beginning was really good. And I got lucky. I got really lucky. So you got to add luck into anybody's success formula. But my first summer at Northwestern Mutual, the CEO of the company asked the department head at the time for someone to do some work on the Milwaukee Ballet, if you can believe that, which is a not-for-profit arts organization here.
Mm-hmm.
And so somehow I got tapped for that. I don't know what went on in the room where they picked me, other than maybe he's new, give it to him, because nobody wanted to do it. I don't know how I got it, but I got to
He
work with
looks like
Don
a dancer.
Schenke, and he must have liked what I did, because then I kept getting all these special projects. And that's the other thing I tell everybody when you're young. If you get asked to do something extra, just do it. You're
Mm-hmm.
young, work your ass off between 25
Mm-hmm.
and 35. And if someone asks you to work on a Saturday on something special, do it,
Mm-hmm.
or on a Sunday or on a holiday or whatever, because it's going to pay big dividends. And so I was lucky enough to have exposure to the senior most people of this company, while I was still a nobody investment analyst. And I think that really just helped me get noticed more. And then, as you start to get better at what you're doing, your career accelerate a little bit. So I was, and I worked on the Edmund Fitzgerald stuff with him. That's the ship that sank that we all know about. He was a former CEO of Northwestern Mutual. So the song about the boat that sank was named after one of our CEOs. Did some work with him on that. I did some work on some hospitals for him. I did work for Jim Erickson, who was the next CEO, on a bunch of stuff that he wanted me to work on. And I think it was just, and I'm sure I did a good job. I'm not trying to brag about it, but the opportunity to do a good job was complete luck, and I'm just so thankful that I got those opportunities. In
And
fact,
then
I ran into Don Schenke's daughter last week,
Hmm.
and I was telling her I don't know if you knew him, Pat, but he was
Mm-hmm.
probably the nicest man I've ever met in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
I just told her how much I appreciated the chance to work directly for him as a 28-year-old. You know what I mean? It
Mm-hmm.
was just awesome.
Yeah, I was exposed to him from '88 until 92 or 3,
Yeah,
whenever
92, I think he left, or 93 maybe. Yeah.
But he was so articulate and funny.
Yeah.
He had
Yeah,
a
he had a
sense of
very
humor.
dry, sly sense of humor. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Um, so you get exposed to these guys. You do a good job for them. You develop friendships with them, essentially. Then what happened? Where was your next big? Like, was there
Well,
a quantum
so
leap for
again,
you? Or?
it's luck. So the guy who was running
Mm-hmm.
our department, I was 37 years old, and I was a portfolio manager by this time. And the guy who was running our department was probably 50. So I had always set my sights on being the department head of what we now call NM Capital, which is our private capital group, private equity, private bonds, those kind of things. And then he just left to go work at Allstate. He went to become president of Allstate's life insurance company subsidiary. And so if he hadn't left, I might have been a portfolio manager for another 15 years. But because he left, the job opened up, and they gave it to me at 37, which was unusually young for that position. But again, I think it was because I built a brand with at the time Jim Erickson, who was the CEO then, and Ed Zor, who succeeded Jim. By this time I was working with Ed too. So they gave me the job and to run NM Capital. A year later, we bought Russell. I led that deal for us. So I got to go on the Russell board, which we owned 100% of, which was cool. And then the year after that, they gave me the real estate department to run too. So we have a huge real estate investment operation to go along with our private equity and private bonds and our public market stuff. So by the time I was not even 40, I was running two of our biggest investment units and on the board of Russell. And basically, I was in charge of the Russell as an investment, not as the business side. But it was all because this guy's name was Casey Silla, who I still stay in touch with, left to go somewhere else. So knock on wood, or whatever. It just the stars aligned once more for me. And then you want me to keep going on my career? Or
Yeah,
do you?
no, I do. I like it.
Okay, so then in 2003, Ed came to me. Now, by this time, Ed was the CEO, Ed Zor, who was my mentor most of my career.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he came to me and said, "We want you." I always thought I was going to be the chief investment officer. I mean, not that I didn't think that I was going to be it, but that was my dream. If I was going to be a senior person at Northwestern Mutual, it was the chief investment officer role,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably the greatest job in the company. It's even better than the CEO job. And so I thought Ed was, I thought I was on that track. And then in 2003, he came to me, and we had, as you know, we were emerging into what we now call the wealth business, but it was what I call the retail side of an investment business. So it's managing our clients' money both through our broker dealer and through our wealth management company. And it was a disaster. We were losing money. There was no strategy. Nobody knew what to do. I had been on the board of another subsidiary we owned, Robert W. Baird, which is a local broker dealer here in town. We used to own Baird. So I knew a little bit about that business. And Ed said, "I'd like you to leave the investment business, the managing money business, and manage a business for Northwestern Mutual." And at the time, and then if you do that, you join what was then called management committee, which was the top 7 or 8 people in the company. Now we call it the senior leadership team, but it was the same
Mm-hmm.
construct. And so in January of 2004, when I was 45, I took over, or I was 44 at the time. I took over running our wealth business, and that was probably the biggest, or maybe the second biggest career challenge, because it was a disaster. It was just everything about it was broken. And many people in this company didn't think we should even be in the wealth business. We should just sell risk products. So there was a whole contingent of people that called it the dark side of the company. And yet the only way to fix it was to grow it. We couldn't make it profitable if we didn't scale the business. So we had to scale the business, which means growing it through the field force. We only sell through Northwestern Mutual representatives. And so I was not only struggling to fix the business, but I was fighting with a not small contingent of senior leaders at the company who thought it was the wrong, that we were going to destroy the culture of this company. And I call those the dark days. That was from
Mm-hmm.
2004 to about 2007. It was, and then we had to do some stuff the field didn't like. We used to have something called a fee in lieu account. You used to be able to charge an advisory fee on a brokerage account. That went away. It was called the Merrill Lynch rule. The SEC took it away. So we had to transition all those reps off of fee-based income back to commission. That was a nightmare. We had to build our advisory business from scratch. And nobody liked it. No, the people in the business didn't like it. The reps didn't like it. And people at the company thought I was the dark side. And it was, talk to Kim. Those were tough. Those were some tough emotional years. I mean, it all worked out.
Mm-hmm.
So you look back, and I tell people, if you've ever met anyone who was in World War II, was actually fighting in World War II, they can tell you horror stories, but they can also have fond memories of camaraderie and the teamwork and stuff like that. And that's what I try to focus on. But we made the business profitable. It's now over 250 billion of assets under management. It's very profitable. We're the fastest growing independent broker dealer in the country. So a lot of blue ribbons. In fact, I got a Pat DeCerbo blue ribbon, I think once from you. I don't know if it was that reason,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of blue ribbons on that business, and we're really proud of where it is now.
No doubt. Um, so what do you see today as the challenges? Like it's hard for.
Well, the biggest challenge, I feel like I'm at the tail end of my career. I feel like I've done what I set out to do. Maybe not as well as I would have liked to have done it, but I feel like it was. And so, I was competing for this job back in '08 and '09. And one of the things the board asked for among the candidates then, there were 4 of us, was a vision statement. Like, where do you want to take the company? And what I wrote in shorthand terms is Ed Zor was the CEO. He started basically on 9/11 and ended with the great financial crisis. And his motif or motto or whatever was, don't screw it up. We've got, and it was a lot of turbulence. And I give him a lot of credit because he didn't screw it up. But I was like, if I became CEO when I was 50 years old, and I told the board, if the mantra is don't screw it up for 15 years, we're going to screw it up, because you've got to evolve. You've got to, and I really wanted to do 3 things with the company. One is transform the culture within the company around performance. We used to be a company where your promotion generally came from time and tenure. Now, that wasn't true of me, so it wasn't all the time. But the next person who had been there the longest often got the promotion when the senior leader left. And I just didn't feel that. I mean, you don't promote the backup quarterback that's been there 6 years. When your starting quarterback retires, you draft a new quarterback. You know what I mean? And so there was a performance culture thing. The second was grow the field. We hadn't grown the field for 30 years, and we're exclusive distribution. And if we don't grow the field, you can't survive over another century with the same number of people, because you've got to grow revenue, expense. So grow the field. And the third was create a distinctive customer experience. I really believed that the companies that win in the 21st century do it on customer experience, not based on product value alone. We're a strong product value company. We've got the best product values in the industry. Our reps know that, our clients know that, our employees know it, but I didn't believe you could win in the 21st century just on product value. We had to create a distinctive client experience. Those are the three things that I wrote about. And I feel like we've done most of that. And I feel really good here in 2023 as it wraps up and I head into my last year of the company. We have a mandatory age 65 policy. I have to retire next year when I turn 65. I feel like we did most of that, and we did some of it well. We did most of it for sure. Some of it we didn't do well, but the beauty of a company that thinks long term is we'll get it all right eventually.
Mm. Rich Templeton, the CEO of Texas Instruments, gave a speech recently at Union College. He's a Union grad. And an audience member asked, what advice would you give to tech executives today? And he said, decide and correct as you go.
Right.
In other words, don't get paralyzed. You have to
Right.
execute and correct as you go. I thought it was a great answer.
I think there's a huge amount of wisdom in that. Leadership is an action. I tell everyone, leadership is not a position. You assume a leadership position, but what makes a leader effective is action. It's not sitting there talking about being a leader. It's action, that you have to go somewhere. And a leader needs to know where he or she wants to go. You might not be right all the time, but if you're sitting around waiting for someone to tell you where to go, then you shouldn't be the leader. You should be part of the team, but you've got, and so I think he's right. Decide and go is a great way to think about it. I love that.
The general manager of the Orlando Magic said something similar. He talked about like an ocean liner. He's like, you might end up in the wrong direction, but then you correct.
Right.
Eventually you'll get back on course.
Well, and especially if you think, we're lucky at this company that most of our CEOs get nice, the runway when they become CEO is at least 8 or 9 years. In my case, it's over 14, assuming you go to mandatory retirement age. And so that knowledge on day one gives you a lot of comfort that you can course correct, that you don't have to get it right. Now, if I only had 3 years, I might have like, holy crap, we better get this right day one. But when you can incrementally change, and we have changed things and lived and learned. And I think that's part of, I use sports analogies a lot, but if you look at any good football coach, the reason you watch film is what's working and not what's not working, and what do you need to do to fix the things that aren't working. And I think corporate America, we have film. We don't actually have video that we watch, but you have all sorts of metrics that are the equivalent of film that tell you what's working and what's not working. And the good leaders lean into that, admit what's not working, and work on it rather than just focus on the good things. And no great coach spends a lot of time looking at plays that work great. You know why they work great. It's the things that didn't work that you gotta look at. And the other thing that I take away from sports that plays into this notion that you're talking about is you've got to be able to take criticism at every, like, I just remember when I was watching film and there was the worst play in my college career. I did everything right except the last thing, and this guy ran me over, for a touchdown, and I just knew that play was in the film, and the whole film, I'm sitting there waiting for it, dreading it. We probably watched it 10 times. My coach just kept playing it over and over. And afterwards, I was kind of mad at him, but he said, the reason I did that is everyone's got to learn from that, including you. And you're still a starter next week. You didn't lose your job, but you can't gloss over your big mistakes. And I tell all my executives that we all have film. It's not, like I said, it's more the metrics that you'll get, and we're all going to make mistakes. And the key is watch those mistakes, figure out what went wrong, and correct them. So I think there's this element of fearless. I don't mean it like I'm some courageous person or anything, but this notion of just do it, just dive into it, action, whatever metaphor, and just be not afraid to take the consequences of it, and then course correct. So I agree. I think action is the key, but you also have to have, you can't just have chaos. You have to have action that's in a certain direction. as far as I'm
No
concerned.
doubt. I mean, from my standpoint, I mean, I love the way, you know, you give us in the field a track to run on.
Yeah.
You know, and I, as a practitioner, I am scared. I'm not fearless.
Yeah. Well,
But I'm afraid, but I'm going to move forward anyway.
that's
And
what courage is, right? Courage is not being afraid. It's courage is taking action when you are afraid. That's what I
right.
mean, right? So that's what it is. That's right.
And then, but the humility is what I'm hearing from you, even after all your success. And I know when you go to your industry conferences, everyone says, "Oh, John, how do you do it?" And it's well deserved. But you know, you're still willing to look at yourself, which is, in my view, so important for anybody.
So, so I try to be humble. I appreciate you saying that. I'm humble because there's a lot of reasons why I think that's the right persona. And I could go into that. But the other thing that I want to talk about is the single greatest superpower in corporate America is self-awareness.
Hmm.
So what the biggest thing that I see with executives that don't make it is that they have a view of themselves that's different than the views of either their peers or their superiors. And you can't have that in sports, right? Your coach tells you where you are, they tell you what you do. But in corporate America, um, it can seep in. I think it's because some people aren't willing to have tough conversations with people and really, sit down and say, John, you're just you're. I remember Ed saying to me once, we were in a management committee meeting and I was fighting with someone and I still think I was right, but he
Hmm.
goes, you're losing the whole crowd because you're just not you're not you're picking on something that's not that material. Let it go. And that was a self-awareness issue. I was so focused on the problem that I couldn't even begin to think about what my peers thought about me. And a coach I had once, this goes to your anthropology major, but he once said to me, because I was struggling with this as I was coming up, I'm a forceful person. I like to argue. I can be loud. And he said,
Hmm.
John, whenever you're in a meeting, be the anthropologist in the room. And I go, what the hell
Hmm.
does that mean? He goes, first figure out why people are saying what they're saying. Don't figure out whether it's right or wrong or if you agree with them or you disagree. Just be the anthropologist and take notes. So if Pat DeSerbo says something, don't write down what he said. Write down why you think Pat said what he said.
Hmm.
And that all plays into then self-awareness, I think, because then all of a sudden you're starting to think about, well, why did I say what you know what I mean? So I think that ability to relate, you don't have to relate to people like, um, some people are good relators. They can relate to anybody. I'm not necessarily like that, but I think if you can listen to them and understand them, you can become more aware of what you're saying and why. So it's that interconnection of self-awareness and it's the why people are saying what they're saying, not the what, that I think is underrated in corporate America.
That is the best line I've heard in a long time. I
All
just,
right.
because I feel like sometimes, like in my own life, if I'm inner directed, if I'm, you know, self-centered fear, for lack of a better
Yeah.
word, I'm worried about my own rice bowl. I'm
Right.
absolutely ineffective. And that's because I'm not focused on your needs, whatever they may be,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
why you're, it's,
But if you're
um,
ever in a meeting, where, I don't know if it would work in a client meeting,
mm-hmm,
but and it might, but when you disagree with people, it's fascinating if you focus more on why they're in that position than whether they're right or wrong.
mm-hmm,
I'm telling you, this was I don't know, maybe 25 years ago. This guy gave
mm-hmm,
me this advice, and I still do it to this day. It was maybe the single biggest
mm-hmm,
leadership advice that I ever got was and he was a psychiatrist, and that he loved
mm-hmm,
examining people and stuff like that. But he said, I don't want you to be a psychiatrist. I want you to be an anthropologist, which
mm-hmm,
is, gets at norms, customs. It's not just what's going on
mm-hmm,
psychologically, but it's the whole environment that's shaping why people say and do what they do. And I thought it was a fascinating approach, and
mm-hmm,
it's really been good for me, I think, long term.
mm.
I wish I
Imagine.
could do it at home. Don't seem to.
It's hardest with the people we're
It's
closest with.
hardest with your family. Oh my God, is it ever? Yeah.
um, So what's this next year going to be like for you? You have, for those people who don't know, you're going to be 65. There's going to be a new CEO. You and the board are going to decide who that is. You're going to have to decide how long you're going to stay. Um, what's it going to be like for you?
I'm super excited about it. I think
Mm,
being CEO for 14 years, there's a burnout element to it, and I'm not burnt out per se, but I think knowing when the game is over
mm,
is gives me more energy than if I didn't. So from a like if I just didn't know when it was going to retire, I don't know how I would motivate myself. But like anybody in a race, I know you've
mhm,
run
mhm,
Ironmans and everything. When you could see the finish line, there's a little more energy, right? There's a little more. The last 2 minutes of a football game, you can get a reserve that you wouldn't pull out if you didn't know when the game was going to end. And so I've got that energy. So that's the first thing. I'm ready to go. Second thing is I think it's going to be a fun experience. I've told everyone the single biggest um, decision that a CEO makes is who their successor should be. Now it's the board's decision, but I've been involved in that process, and it would be a disaster for me as a I would be a bad CEO if I didn't care who the next CEO was. And I tell everyone my goal is the next CEO I hope is the greatest CEO in Northwestern Mutual history. I hope I'm number
mhm,
two, but I
mhm,
hope the next CEO is the greatest CEO because that would be the crowning achievement of my career. And
mm.
so I'm excited about that. And then I'm excited that the way our culture works, I'll get to overlap with that person for X number of months. And I'm really looking forward to that mentorship. No, you can't imagine what it's like being the CEO. It's of a
Mhm.
company of this scale. It's just there's no training for it. There's no playbook for it. And so the it's a daunting thing. There's also some weird, like I joke the day after they announced that I was CEO, I became the most popular man in Milwaukee. All of a sudden, Kim
Mhm.
and I had friends we didn't even know lived in the city, and they're, hey John, we want to go out to dinner with you and
Mhm.
Kim, and we want you to come to this function, and can you come to our Christmas party, and can you come? And I'm like, I don't even I've met you once in my life, and so you have to separate the position from your personality because when the position's gone, none of those people are going to be calling me anyway. So you've got to so all of that. If you, I don't know if you want to call it wisdom or battle scars. I'm really looking forward to a period to work with my successor and exit gracefully, pass the baton like a great relay race, and then go do something else.
Years ago, my probably best relationship ever was the CEO of Key Corp, and he was like you, president, CEO, and chairman of the board. And his name was Victor J. Riley Jr. And I said, Mr. Riley, who's your best friend? And he said, well, we have 15,000 employees. He says, the man on the street in Albany is not my confidant. He said, even my own people, I limit what I tell them because
Yeah,
the magnitude of the problems is so
right,
great. He's like, I
right,
might share stuff with the board, maybe just a committee sometimes. He says, I can confide in my competitors, but there are legal limitations
right.
and competitive reasons why I limit that. He said, so I confide in my wife. So she's my best friend. And he said, she sort of seems to understand what I do and she sort of seems to care. And I looked at him and I thought, that's what they mean. Like it was really lonely at the top for him,
Yeah,
like in the
right.
very,
There's a
very
lot
top.
of truth in that. I mean, I can't, I totally agree with everything he said. The other thing I would add is there's people who say they're your friend, but they really are your friend because of what the position brings, not because they want to hang out and have a beer with you on a Friday night. And so that's what we, as you know, I think I've told you we have this lake house in northern Wisconsin. It's 280 miles north of here. It's on the border with the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, so it's about as far north of Wisconsin as you can get. And what I love about up there is I know everyone up there who wants to have a beer with me wants to have a beer with me because it's John Schlifske, not because I'm the CEO. Because half of them don't even know what I do for a living, and so that's real friendship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the position has given me new friends
Mm.
that I wouldn't have had if I wasn't CEO, and I'm looking forward to continuing those friendships after it. But there's also a lot of people I know that the minute I'm gone, like I just got invited to something in Saudi Arabia to meet with the crown prince, and it's this all expense. There's no way I'm going to get invited to that the day after I step down, right? And so you've got to get that in your head that it's not you as a person they're inviting. They're
Mm.
inviting the person in this position of power.
Mm.
And I never want to mix my friendships with the people that want to hang out with me because of the position of power. I mean, I'm happy when they overlap sincerely, but
Mm.
most of the time it's not that at all. So
There was a great Merle Haggard interview with Dan Rather that I watched recently. And about halfway through it, he's talking about why he continues to perform. And he says, because I don't want to be lonely. And he says to Dan Rather, he says, if you tell your fans to leave you alone, eventually they'll leave you alone.
hmm
But then you'll be lonely. He
yeah,
says, I don't want to be lonely. And he says, Dan, and neither do you. And then Dan says, well, what about your family? You have kids, you have grandkids, you have great grandkids. And he says, yeah, I love my family, but, sometimes I wonder. And he says, I just hope when my grandson tells me he loves me, he really means it. And I was like, oh my gosh,
yeah.
that is so powerful.
Well,
Yeah.
my wife, is got a lot of positive qualities, but one of them is she looks out for that side of us and me,
Mm,
and I'm really confident that I won't be lonely in retirement like Merle Haggard, and
mm,
I would throw Eric Church, who I love Merle Haggard, by the way. I've got a whole
mm,
70s country playlist, which goes back to my bus trips at Carleton College football. But um, Eric Church has a song called "Holding My Own," and he talks about, and I'm going to incorporate this into my farewell speech whenever I give it. But he
mm,
talks about um, the noise in his head, and it's just the job is constant noise in your head, and it gets to you after a while. And he's looking forward to holding his own, and his own is his boys and his wife. And so the song is "I'm holding my own at the end of my career," and he says, "I still miss the buzz, I still miss the stage," and he hasn't retired, but you can see he's leaning into that, and that's kind of how I feel is holding my own when I retire is what it's all about, and it'll be my friends and my family,
mhm,
plenty of whom are in the field, by the way, our sales force. I mean, that's the beauty of I think our company, which is the field. I've never felt like my relationships were dependent on my position because as you know, people in our field will tell you you're a jerk or you're wrong, you're stupid or you're this.
mm,
I mean, nobody. I've never really felt like people in the field kiss your butt. I think they're very honest with you, and so I feel
mm,
really good about the relationships with you and many people like
mhm,
you that I've built over these years because I don't think they're dependent on. I hope I'm right, but I don't,
mhm,
and I could be smoking something, but I don't think they're dependent on John Schlifske as the CEO. The CEO position gave me the opportunity to meet all of you, but the relationships are unrelated to the position of power.
mhm.
I hope. I think.
I believe it. I mean, I think we need to be respectful, but
Yeah.
there's definitely freedom of speech
Yeah. Right.
at
Oh, and
Northwestern
it's always
Mutual.
been respectful.
Yeah.
There's never been name calling or anything, but and by the way, that's what makes our company great is we don't have to do market surveys. We get instant feedback. I mean, I talk to I'm telling you, one of our competitors, they're doing a
Mhm.
strategic review and blah, blah. And they go, do you ever do that? I go, I just go to field meetings and I get my strategic review because we know from you what works in the marketplace and what doesn't. I don't need to hire McKinsey to come up with a
Right.
strategic plan. So, yeah.
So this is a little strange, but you introduced me to Jamie Dimon years ago. And when I was there, I was telling him about you. And he says, you must be good friends with the CEO because he called me personally and said, will you meet with my guy?
Right. Yeah.
And he said, how can that be? And I was like, I don't know. It's amazing how accessible he and others are. And he said, well, when you guys have like a gathering, a summit of some sort, does he go to it? And I said, yeah, he goes. And he said, does he hang out with you guys? And I said, yeah, he hangs out with us. He plays cards with some of the guys. And he said, oh, wow. And he said, what about like if you guys ask him like to do something, does he follow through? And I said, yeah, he follows through. Like you follow up with his assistant. He says
Mhm.
call and whatnot. And it was really interesting that he was curious about that because it was obvious that you and I are friendly.
Mhm.
And I guess he does something similar. And it didn't surprise me really. His company is obviously super big, but he goes to some of these meetings and he has like an attendant that comes with him that walks around and takes notes. And whatever commitments he makes, the attendant makes sure that they get followed up on. So you might, for this last year, just need a valet or something at some
Well, I
point.
don't have an attendant. What I've started to do, because I've forgotten a few times, what I tell everyone now is if I commit to something, you have to email me to remind me. So
Yep.
I'm not going to walk around with an attendant. I'm not going
Yep.
to take notes at when we're having a beer at a forum reception.
I'll
But
take
I'm
notes.
happy to do it. But I'm counting on you to remind me. And the beauty of Northwestern Mutual, well, there's two things that I love. One is we're either a big small company or a small big company. The scale of our company financially is different than the scale of our company people wise. We just know so many people, and I love that. And the second thing is, I really believe that um, it's a good group of people. I mean, you're right. I love going to forum. I love hanging out with people at forum. I love talking about forum. Sometimes you talk business, sometimes you talk sports, sometimes you talk politics, but it's always fun, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. It's a great guys' weekend for me. Although I don't mean it like male. It's a weekend away where you can just be yourself and hang out with friends and just have a good time. It's awesome.
I like it because the average person has good people skills and they're smart.
Right,
It's a good combination.
right,
There's no
right.
dummies. There's a
No,
few, but not
mm-mm,
a lot.
no, that's right.
um, so we're getting towards the end. I know you have a busy day, but is there any advice you might have for people in the field or anything that you think might, before we wrap up, anything that we've left out that might make sense?
Um, oh, I don't know if I have any amazing words of wisdom.
What about to other CEOs? Like, could they learn from Northwestern Mutual? Like, if they were open to it?
I think the biggest takeaway that what I talk to my peers, and they don't say necessarily that I'm that great, but they love our company.
Mm-hmm.
All our peers want to be Northwestern Mutual. That's a pretty cool position when I go to
Mm-hmm.
industry meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of our superpower is we know who we are and we're not trying to be something else. And we know over time we're going to get there. And so this notion of patience and Popeye, I am what I am and that's all that I am. I think that's what Northwestern Mutual is. We know who we are. We're comfortable being who we are. We're not JP Morgan. The president of the United States is not going to call me up and get my thoughts on the economy.
Mm-hmm.
We're not a celebrity kind of brand. I mean, there's nothing about our company where, some of these CEOs are, superstar CEO. We're this really just, I think, down to earth company, but because we are so good at being who we are that's why we win in the marketplace. And then you add to it that we're focused on our clients as customers and as owners at the same time. I think and I know it's hard when you're a public company. I'm on a public company board. They want results every quarter, but it's that notion of I am who I am and I'm going to be really good at that. And I don't care what everybody else does. I'm going to do what I like to do because we're good at it. I think that's an awesome way to run a company. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I didn't come up with that. It's sort of ingrained in you here. Uh, and I tell my kids, so go where you're wanted and be who you are. And that'll be 9/10 of life right there. Don't try to be
Amen.
someone else and don't go where people don't want you.
Amen. There's like a humility in that, like a confidence in that. I don't know. You know, for me, the analogy is Sisyphus. I'm at the bottom of the hill
Right.
with the rock every day,
Right.
and I shovel coal all day long
Right.
into the
Right.
furnace. I don't know when the
Right.
furnace is going to be hot enough.
Yeah. Right.
But I ask this question a lot, and it's the most important punctuation in the English language is the hyphen. It's the between your date of birth and your date of death.
Right.
So if I was summarizing you to a third party, long beyond your years, you're no longer here. What would you want people to know about John Schlifske?
I think I'd want him to know that I'm religious. I'm I'm a God-fearing person. I'm Christian. It's a huge part of who I am. I think you can be a great Christian and a great business leader, and I've tried to do that. That would be the first thing. Second thing is, I'm really a family person first. That's more important to me than career or accolades, and it's impossible to balance as CEO. That's the other thing I'm looking forward to is getting back to that. I think I bet I've told my wife a million times, she'll say, "Hey, let's do that," and I'm like, can't, because something else is there. So the ability to be more of a family man will be great. And then my dad, what I've always tried to do, and I hope if I had a career footnote, it would be he did the best he could. My dad said, I don't care if you're going to be a executive or a ditch digger or anything in between, just always do the best you can. And I just, that to me is what motivates me is to be because, people won't know if I'm not doing my best, but I'll know if I'm not doing my best.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this internal measurement system, and I don't feel that I don't have it where it means that I can't have family time, that I can't relax. But when you're doing your job, you've got to be all in and do your best. And so if those three things are thought about me after I'm gone, I'd be very happy.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank
It
you,
was
Pat.
great to see you.
Went fast. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take care.
Take care.
If you enjoy the most fascinating podcast in the world, please follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow on Apple Podcast.